Hello there, internets. So, Elite Dangerous 3.0 released earlier last week, and I've actually had a chance to sit down and play it as no baby as of yet, but this week for certain that'll change. However, that has led me to have a little bit of time because I'd taken days off of work in order to sit down and play with Elite Dangerous 3.0. My initial impressions are thus far there's a lot of very, very good things in this patch, and a much needed patch, and the fact that it was free to all Horizons owners and even some of the content and stuff like that is not locked behind Horizons, I find to be a very good thing. This is a step that Frontier needed to kind of do to repair what essentially turned out to be a year of significant disappointment, or really even a entire season of significant disappointment. Now, there's not a lot of what I would consider to be bad things in this patch necessarily. I'll talk a little bit about some things that I'm kind of scratching my head going, I'm not sure if they're any better or not. Just kind of different and alluding to some of the same problems that still have yet to be addressed, and we'll see where that goes later on this year. So first off is going to be crime and punishment, and I really frankly don't know if this crime and punishment system is necessarily better than the old system. It's just different. And there's aspects of it that I like, and there's other aspects that I'm just kind of still scratching my head going, well, okay, I guess, whatever. What I do like about it is that the bounties are tied to ships instead of your commander character. So if you want to go create or go out and do piracy and stuff like that, you basically build a ship to do it. And I think for newer players, this is a much bigger of a deal, but to those of us who've been playing for 3 or 4 years at this point, who have amassed billions upon billions of credits, hitting essentially every money train exploit there's been in the game since its inception, big whoopity effing do. Okay, so I spend 20, 30 million credits building a medium-sized ship to go around ganking people and whatnot. And then I just return to a starport, collect my old ship or another ship that doesn't have a bounty on it, and go about my business. There's still nothing there that really tracks to your commander, and it's just kind of another loophole there that I'm not sure what their train of thought was, and things are confusing. Your notoriety level, so then your ability to then pay off the bounties on that ship at, say, an Interstellar Factions location, is tied to your notoriety, and your notoriety only goes down in-game time played. That's initially something that I was like, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense and stuff, and I don't know what my notoriety level was initially because I can't seem to find out where that information is located with any menu screens that tells you what your notoriety is. It may be there, I just haven't found it, and if I haven't found it, that means it's not in somewhere that's intuitively obvious, and that's a UI design failure. That being said, when I did go to pay it off, and I had played for several hours, I'd switched out from my cutter to my asp to go do the Guardians thing, and go farm Guardian crap to then turn in to unlock Guardian gear. And it was, over the course of a couple, 3 days, probably 6 to 8 hours, and when I went to go pay it off, it still said that my notoriety level was 2. Well, how I fixed that is I just stayed logged in overnight with my computer, went upstairs, went to bed, came back the next morning, and my notoriety was 1, paid off my bounties. So there is a loophole there. I guess it is kind of like real life. I mean, if there weren't loopholes in the law and all of that, folks like my wife wouldn't have a job. So overall, I'm kind of neutral about these changes to the crime and punishment system. I think it is overly more complex than it was before, than it needs to be necessarily. I do like the fact that your bounties are no longer tied to a real-world time schedule in which it incentivized you to log out for a week and go play something else instead of being actively engaged in the game world. And the fact that notoriety is now tied to your in-game playtime, I do like. Again, there's still ways around this with the ability to just log in and stay logged in for hours at a time in order to negate that function. But again, there's always going to be loopholes, and players are going to find them. That's just what people do in these multiplayer games. Next up is the de-Beigification of the galaxy and the return of color to moons and planets. The universe is once again very visually interesting to look at again, and I, for one, love it. I am not a big person for galactic screenshot simulator aspects of Elite Dangerous, which is one of the elements that, frankly, the game does excel at. but it is a delight to go and see planets have color again. They have made planets great again, as far as I am concerned. Now, I have noticed a few things. I have set my graphics setting down from PC Ultra to VR Medium for use with a virtual reality headset, and I have to say that once I've done that, it's taken care of any frame stuttering issues that I was having before with my 970. And the Galaxy is a very smooth, surreal, and immersive place in VR. If you have a VR headset, whether it's the Vive or an Oculus Rift, this is a game that you absolutely must pick up, even if it isn't normally your cup of tea. And I have no complaints with the reshading issues or the reshader changes that they've done. The Galaxy looks phenomenal again. And even though the planet that I'm landed on here is kind of white and gray, there are others that are just all kinds of different colors, and you can pick up on visual cues of where you need to land for different material types and stuff like that. Still learning my way around that as we have the new inventory system for materials, and kind of segue right into that. So how I've spent most of my time in Elite Dangerous over the course of the past week has actually been farming materials, because I was up against that 1,000 unit cap almost from the time that it was introduced. The early days of 2.0 went around collecting a bunch of material, and this was before the introduction of the engineers, so we actually had something really useful to use it for, other than I think you could have used it for some armament refill synthesis and jumponium and a couple of other things like that in those days. So I've been up against that wall for such a long time that I had just stopped ignoring USSs and material collection and stuff like that altogether, because I didn't have any room for it. In fact, I would have to dump things on a routine basis in order to collect things that I actually needed for whatever component I was engineering at that time. Couple this with the new engineering system, which overall I really like, because you get a finite result at the end of the day. There is a max out of each individual component, coupled with the fact that experimental effects now cost a finite amount of resources instead of relying on RNGesus. The only thing that RNGesus is there is it might take you 18 spins of the wheel versus 15 spins of the wheel versus 20 spins of the wheel. You know that if you collect the material and do enough spins of the wheels, everybody will max out at that same point. Now, I'm sure to those people who were lucky enough to get God rolls in their first or two rolls, versus the guy who did 1,000 rolls and never did get a God roll, those people are going to be a little bit miffed off because, hey, they either spent the time or had the luck to give them a little bit slight of advantage, especially in ship-to-ship combat, that some pilots actually relied upon. Although many of them that did rely on that were using exploits at the time and got those modules basically taken away from them. I personally, back when all that happened, would have liked to have seen some accounts actually banned, but it looks like a fair number of those people just left the game entirely, which isn't entirely a bad thing, I think. But again, it means that if you put in the time and effort, yeah, it might take you a couple more rolls than the other guy, but you are going to get to the same plateau and not have to worry about the blessings of RNGesus that particular day. And this is a much better system overall. I don't really have any complaints. I guess the one complaint people have is the people who maybe just rolled one or two rolls and went on, and that was good enough for them. Now you have to roll up each individual component, but I think that that is fine. Couple that with the new missions reward systems and the number and amounts of rewards that I've been seeing given out for not only regular missions, but wing missions as well, in terms of especially what used to be considered rarer items on those lists. I think that it works out very nicely that you now can get what you need by playing the game and undertaking missions. For way too long, for really honestly a couple of years, I never paid attention to the missions board. I really didn't care. I would just go bounty hunt and kind of fall into the trap of doing the same old things again. Ignore USSs, and this is getting me to go into USSs, to go back onto the surface of planets and collect materials that I'm going to need down the line and kind of get some of those things filled back up while I'm waiting for a baby. So it's one of those things. I like this new system. I understand that there are going to be those there that don't. I think that this is a fantastic, basically, change to the entire game. And as I'm coming up here, I'm going to kind of get into a couple of the negative things as I come up on a POI that just randomly stumbled upon in the game. So here I'm happening upon this just point of interest installation that's randomly generated. as you drive around. And it's one of those things that we maybe could see something pop up to where there's something to raid there eventually, much like with megaships, and see to those mechanics enter into different structure types and things like that. That could provide some interesting things to happen on the surface of planets that aren't currently there. But even with the new wing missions, it falls seriously short of where things needed to be. These wing missions that we got right now needed to be when wings were introduced 3 years ago. If this was what was introduced with in terms of wing missions when wings were introduced 3 years ago, I think it would have been okay given that we see or had seen further iteration to development and more mission types added to the game between then and now. However, if you really look at it, there's essentially just 3 missions, and the only thing that changes is some text and locations. There's one assassination mission that I've seen with Wing Up so far. And it is the same mission. My friends and I, the first night or two, went out and did the same mission essentially 2 or 3 times. The only thing that changes is the payouts, the names, and the system that you go to hunt them down. In terms of the actual encounter itself, it's with the same half-dozen ships. There's going to be an Anaconda there, an FDL, a couple of smaller ships, I think usually a drop ship or an assault ship or something like that. And okay, you kill the Anaconda, you kill his wingmates and stuff like that. Yeah, it is a little bit more difficult if you're flying by yourself, but if you're in a god tier ship like my Cutter is, I can probably do those wing missions solo. I wish we would have seen the wings mission system basically be filled out to almost any type of mission that is on the mission board, and we just had the option to send it to our wing party for them to accept, instead of there actually having to be specific wing delivered missions. I wish that we could accept scan the beacon, assault the skimmer, or kill the Goliath missions. Things like that that would incentivize teaming up for a combined arms assault on a facility. Even if it was a facility that we just randomly come upon driving around or flying around on the surface of a planet, would make for some unique engagements. Maybe if you couple in eventually with the megaship piracy type mechanics, when you can raid maybe surface installations in the future, hopefully, because they're talking about maybe including this to future other installations in the future, and I hope we get to see that. Now, it'll be very interesting to see how this change in producers affects how they're going to flesh these things out. I think it was a Michael Brooks thing of, well, if you don't use it, we're not going to develop for it. I think that was very much his mentality, and now that he's moved on to the Jurassic Park project, I'm hoping that the new guy in charge reevaluates that and takes a look at things and realizes that, hey, if all you're going to give me for wing missions is, either go deliver this to there, go find this and deliver it back to here, basically fetch quests with just bigger numbers, and one combat mission that once you've done it 2, 3, or 4 times and there's no real wrinkles to it, there's no differentiation, it is literally the same mission over and over and over again, people aren't going to engage with it because there's other things to do. And frankly, if you're just going to give us one mission to repeat over and over again, it's going to get very boring very quickly. So I hope that in these smaller content updates coming probably in June and probably September, October, I hope that these include more of these type of missions, different mission wrinkles, and a whole lot of improvements to that system. Else, it's going to be once again one of those CQC type situations to where nobody's going to end up using it, or multi-crew for that fact, because what you delivered was woefully short. And if there's any criticism that I have of this patch, it is how wing missions have been implemented thus far. Maybe hopefully these are something that they can add in smaller incremental updates as the time goes on, as they try to do with the 2.4 content. If they can say add a couple of new missions every few weeks, I think that would be a great opportunity, and I hope that Frontier takes advantage of it. I understand that there is some problems with doing that for PlayStation and Xbox, with testing and fees associated with those type of updates. So I'm kind of hopeful that maybe we'll see some action here in the future when it comes to that. But I will say that giving 3.0 or Season Beyond, whatever you want to call it, out as a free upgrade to people who have already purchased Horizons, and even some of the features being included into the base game if you've never bought Horizons, as essentially thank you to the community for standing by them, especially the core player base, through thick and thin, because I think that the end of the day conclusion on the 2.0 Horizons season was one of really kind of disappointment, that it was lackluster at best, and in many respects went in the wrong direction in many ways. And I will give credit to where credit is due, I believe, and that is with the new senior producer of Elite Dangerous. I don't know the guy's name, but the former producer went over to the Jurassic Park project, and I think having fresh new eyes and blood running the show and basically allocating man hours and resources to the different aspects of gameplay and wishing to further flesh out that gameplay is the absolute right move. And kudos for not charging another $20, $30 for it and giving it to the players and the backers, those of us who were back in the day backers, as a freebie, I think is major props. I did buy a cutter ship kit. I may buy a Chieftain paint kit here one of these days as well, as appreciation. Because I enjoy what they were doing, even though I don't always agree with some of the aspects of where they've allocated the time and resources, especially after the past 2 years. But I think that the new producer is riding that ship and taking things in a much more interesting direction. Now, a couple of areas of gameplay that I haven't touched on is megaship piracy. I haven't gotten friends online, and people have been set up to do that. People have been trying out the engineering, collecting materials, stuff of that nature. So probably here in a couple of weeks, we'll go out and pirate a megaship and see how well that works. But those are elements of gameplay that could be expanded upon and brought to other systems, other items like the base that we saw earlier on here that I just randomly came across. Wouldn't it be cool if there had been a way to scan down, take out a generator or two, and steal loot from there, just as an element of randomly injected gameplay? Don't know what the future exactly holds here. Will they continue on this direction of developing things further? I think my biggest question that I would love to see an answer to, and it may not happen until very much later this year, is what are they going to do with the background simulation? If they can flesh out the background simulation, and again, maybe that takes another year for them to be able to do so, to where we're starting to see elements like the whole rebuilding station systems being introduced into the game, I think that that is the core foundation for how eventually fleet carriers will work, and with squadrons and stuff like that. This game could be at a whole nother level in another year, again, under the new leadership of its new senior producer or executive producer. I like where things are going for the most part. There's still going to be a fair amount of wait and see. Let's see where things shake out. But this is a much improved direction. And keep at it, Frontier. Try not to make too many more mistakes of giving us overpowered, underpriced, overpowered, and engineerable materials that maybe weren't supposed to be. I mean, at this point, I guess you should just expect Frontier to have those type of bugs and issues in the development processes. But nonetheless, 3.0, I think, is the mark of hopefully where they've righted the ship and have turned things around. I mean, look at player count since the beginning of the year. Couple that with the PlayStation 4 release at the end of last year. Also include the fact that it was heavily discounted during the holiday season, and a lot of people are picking it up. And I've seen a lot more people back in the game than I've seen in 2 years. Names and faces that I'm like, hey, I remember you from Test Mostly Harmless, 3 years ago. Oh yeah, I'm back checking things out. Oh my gosh, things were kind of cool. Oh, the planets look so cool. Oh, I was a premium beta backer. You mean I can land on the planets and stuff now? Again, there's still some questions of how much content and things there are to do, and whether or not, obviously, there's more things that could be fleshed out and improved there. But I think the ship is sailing, if not in the right course, in the general right direction, heading at this point. So we'll see where the winds take us over the course of the next year. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. And again, content on this channel over the coming few weeks and months is going to be sporadic at best. If the little baby girl decides not to be as cooperative or too cooperative, I think going in Thursday night for induction. So yeah, by this time next week we'll have a little one here. So, and newborns tend to take up a lot of time. So again, I probably won't be around doing videos or streaming or anything like that for quite a few weeks into the future. I may sneak in an hour or two here or there, but that's about all that can be expected at this point. So until next time, probably until the next update, I will see you next time. Till then, thank you, and see you in the galaxy.